a girl on one side and HUD girls on. They grabbed their hands together and they jumped. And it was one reporter said that the thing that was most dramatic was hearing thud, thud, thud. And this was witnessed by thousands of people, and children, and so on.
So now, please welcome the official, non-official, non-sponsor of the Savannah Bananas, but a big fan. Please welcome John Fletcher.
Well, thank you, my friend Jesse Cole, owner of the Savannah Bananas, and welcome to this edition of 15 on Fridays with Fletch. As we celebrate our nation's 250th birthday, we should reflect upon pivotal moments in our history. So I've invited my very favorite teacher from Pasco High School, the most amazing history teacher ever, to share some of those pivotal moments. After graduating from Pasco himself, he played quarterback for the Nebraska Cornhuskers football team. Then he committed to making a difference in the classroom. Dean Cozine brought history to life, teaching at Pasco and then moving to California, where he was a distinguished teacher at a private school. We're in for a treat with my favorite teacher ever. Let's try it, bust it right there. We're in for a treat now with my favorite teacher ever. He's the ultimate storyteller who brings history to life. Please welcome Dean Cozine. Dean, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine.
That's great.
Wonderful day.
Well, so tell us where and how you developed such a passion for history, and specifically American history.
Well, history is always easy for me. And when I came back to Texas and I decided to finish my degree in Texas at North Texas State University, I found out I had to take U.S. history, U.S. government, and Texas government to get a degree there. So I took a couple of courses of U.S. history and just loved it, decided to major in history. I was at that point going to be a geology major, decided really didn't like that. So that's how I became history. Then I went to North Texas State, got a degree in history and a minor in political science, and ended up with a master's in history from North Texas State too.
So tell us about why is it important for us to understand so many of our nation's lesser known history moments?
Well, if you're a presentist, which means only you understand the present, then you don't understand what's going on today. And if you don't understand what happened yesterday, you have nothing to compare with what is going on today. You have no idea whether it's normal, abnormal, or what. So you need to understand history to understand what it means to be, in a sense, an American, and an American in your view. And that's why I think that's important. I think that's one of the lackings today, that we don't have enough people who really have a history background.
One of those pivotal moments is called the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire from March 25th of 1911. Please tell us about it.
Well, my introduction to it was from a book called Triangles, The Fire That Changed America. And this was a book written in 2005. It was very detailed. And it is about a story of about immigrant Jewish and Italian women who worked at a shirtwaist fire. My cat here's on top. And they worked in the Ash building on the 8th, 9th, and 10th floor. That is in New York City. And it is 1 block from Washington Square. It was on the corner of Green Street and Washington Place Street. And they made dresses, shirtwaist dresses, which were famous then and famous now, made out of cotton. A fire broke out there at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday in March 11th, 1911, and started on the 8th floor, killed 146 people. Of those 146 people, 123 were women, and the others were obviously men. It would have gone not in history had it not been for 2 things. One, it was Saturday afternoon, it was sunny. Everybody was out into Washington Square Park. If you've ever seen when Harry met Sally, that's where Sally drops off Harry. And it's just a short block from Greenwich Village. And so there were actually thousands of people around where the factory was. It's a 10-story building. And it was sunny. And the other thing that happened was if the fire had killed all 146 people in that building, there would have been no problem. But the problem was is that the work was taking place, the cutting, sewing, and all that was on the 8th and 9th floor. And the doors were locked during the time on the 8th and 9th floor. There was a stair up from Green Street, stair up from Washington Place, and two elevators. One elevator didn't work, another elevator did work. And when the fire broke out on the 8th floor, the key was found quickly for the 8th floor, and those people escaped. But the 9th floor, they could not find the key, and the doors opened inward instead of outward. And so when they rushed the door, there were a lot of people who were actually crushed as they couldn't get the door open and never found the key. And so the people who died were on the 9th floor. But what made it dramatic was this all took place in 18 minutes. Fire department arrived in 5 minutes, but their ladders only went to the 5th floor, so they couldn't get to the 8th and 9th and 10th floor. And so what happened was that many people saw the fire break out and got there quickly from all around there and standing around. And 62 people died by jumping or falling out the windows onto the street. And so there are stories about where a young man hugged a girl on one side and hugged girls on. They grabbed their hands together and they jumped. And one reporter said that the thing that was most dramatic was hearing thud, thud, thud. And this was witnessed by thousands of people, and children, and so on. And that's what made it so dramatic, was that these girls, most of them Jewish and Italians, teenage girls, immigrants, died. But one person who was there that was most important and lost it was Frances Perkins, who was the Secretary of Labor under FDR. And she had been dramatically involved in trying to improve working conditions. This particular factory is owned by a guy named Harrison Blank, and they had fires twice before in their factories where they burned them up in the morning and where nobody was there to collect the insurance when things were down. So it wasn't something that was unusual for them. But anyway, what happened was this stunned everybody. There had been a strike in 1909 to try to unionize the factory. Everybody in New York City, others had agreed to some of the terms, except Harrison Blank refused to have a union. And so there's no improvements. The fire, by the way, broke out in bins that were full of cotton and paper and so on. Supposed to be emptied every day, hadn't been emptied in 7 weeks. So there was just thousands of this paper and cotton pieces there. That's what made it so bad. But frankly, what happened was New York State decided that there needed to be something done to protect workers. And Frances Perkins led that movement. And within 10 years, 30 major laws have been passed to begin to protect worker safety. But the real thing that came about this was there was a New York senator just elected, and his name was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And he was in the legislature from 1911 to 1913. 1913, he was appointed by Wilson to be the Undersecretary of the Navy that he left. But when he hired Frances Perkins to be Secretary of Labor, she said that his terms were that he was going to have to do things to help workers. So directly out of this in the New Deal came the Social Security Act, which Frances Perkins wrote, the Fair Labor Standards Act, the Widener Act that made unions legal. So this fire, in the long run, had an enormous impact on the future. The New Deal, whether you like those laws or not, they changed America, and they began the history of trying to make workplaces safe and help and places that were people would go to work and know that they were going to go home. Do you realize that at this time that the average 50,000 people died a year in factory accidents in the United States in 1900 and so on? And that's what it was trying to deal with.
Well, with that, you talked about them not having the keys. So I presume that the workers were locked into their workrooms. Is that correct? Is that a big
They
part
were
of it?
working. They were working. They were supposed to get out at 5, and so they were working on the 8th floor. They had cutting tables and patterns and so on, and a whole bunch of girls were on sewing machines, working full time sewing these patterns. Same thing true at the 9th floor. 10th floor were offices. The people on the 10th floor escaped. By the way, if you want to know this, there was a New York City law firm was right a building was right across from them, very close. They put a ladder across the top of the top floor of the 10th, and the law students there and a professor helped people crawl across that ladder into the New York law to escape the fire.
Wow.
Oh, here's another little tidbit. They the Harrison Blank were tried for manslaughter, and they were found not guilty. And they were found not guilty because it could not be proved that they knew the doors were locked. They locked the doors to keep union workers out, and they locked the doors to when they let people out. They let only the girls out one door because they wanted to make sure they didn't steal anything. And so they were found not guilty. But what is even more disgusting about it for me is they collected their insurance, and they ended up having to pay the 146 workers that died, families, $75. They got $400 for each one of them. So they made money over this.
That's incredible. When people ask me what made you my favorite teacher, I just have to give it the best example is we were talking about the Bolshevik Revolution. And you could very easily have just glazed over it and said Russia was in a period of instability, but rather you told the story about, tell us a little bit about, real quickly, the short version of Gregor Rasputin and his impact on the Tsar's son, who was a hemophiliac.
But that story, the basis for that story was I was a student teacher at Carter Riverside, and I had world history, and my major teacher left me alone, and I was having a terrible time, and I decided I just finished reading the book that had that story, and so I memorized it as best I could, and came in and tried it on the kids, and for the first time, I had kids that were interested in history. From that point on, I decided I was going to spend whatever time I could trying to find stories that interest kids that would make a point of a theme or a point that I was trying to make. Basically, what Rasputin was is a charlatan, one of these guys who claimed he had access to God, and he influenced Alexander and the Tsar, and particularly the wife, because maybe the son had leukemia, and Rasputin claimed he could cure the kid, and apparently he had some luck or something when that happened. But anyway, the nobles basically decided they had to get rid of him. They didn't get rid of him, there was going to be a revolution and so on, and so they tried to kill him. And I think you still remember the story. They tried to poison him. They tried to kill him. They ultimately tied him up and took him out to the river, dumped him in the river. We were thinking he was dead, and when the body came up on shore, found out that he drowned. That was short. There's a little more to it. That they offered him. One guy offered him his wife, and so on and all that. So, but Rasputin was a historical figure that shaped Russian history the wrong way at the wrong time.
Well, what you talked about when you told that story, I mean, I'm sitting there in class and I'm just totally concentrating on this because you took 2 days to
I
tell
know.
this story and you brought history to life where we felt we could almost smell it. You could see it. I mean, it was so incredible. And I think that's where I first learned about storytelling and the power of a strong story. And you found the way to weave all the details and work it all in. And many years later, I was telling the story to Mac Churchill, who was 2 years ahead of me at Pascal, who became a car dealer. And I said, I was I was using an example of Dean Cozine. He says, "Well, let me tell you mine," and he tells me the exact same story about Rasputin and the Tsar and the Tsarina and the hemophiliac son. And I thought, okay, there's impact. I mean, the fact that here this guy is, and he all these years later he could repeat it, and so that's when we had you come in during our classes reunion that year, because you were just like the beloved teacher, and so I think I'm just thankful for you. So let's do this. Coming up in our next interview, the astounding story about Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his fake walk, and if he had not mastered it, he would never have become governor and president. We've been visiting with legendary history teacher Dean Cozine. Thanks for joining us today, Dean, and we look forward to seeing you again.